Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Raven's Readings. I'm currently reading to you from Three Men in a Boat. It's a very descriptive account of a trip up the Thames, interspersed with numerous anecdotes and all told with a wry sense of humour. It was written in 1889 by Jerome K. Jerome. I do readings twice a week. If you subscribe to my Substack newsletter, you'll get notified of my updates as soon as they're ready. If you enjoy this reading or have other classics you'd like to hear, leave me a comment. Last episode we saw that rowing a boat is not all that easy. Next we learned that steam launches are great after all, and that fishing requires much creativity. Chapter 16. We came in sight of Reading about 11. The river is dirty and dismal here. One does not linger in the neighborhood of Reading. The town itself is a famous old place dating from the dim days of King Ethelred, when the Danes anchored their warships in the Kennet and started from Reading to ravage all the land from Wessex, and here Ethelred and his brother Alfred fought and defeated them, Ethelred doing the praying and Alfred the fighting. In later years, Reading seems to have been regarded as a handy place to run down to when matters were becoming unpleasant in London. Parliament generally rushed off to Reading whenever there was a plague on at Westminster, and in 1625 the law followed suit, and all the courts were held at Reading. It must have been worthwhile having a mere ordinary plague now and then in London to get rid of both the lawyers and the Parliament. During the parliamentary struggle, Reading was besieged by the Earl of Essex, and a quarter of a century later the Prince of Orange routed King James's troops there. Henry I lies buried at Reading in the Benedictine abbey founded by him there, the ruins of which may still be seen, and in this same abbey, great John of Gaunt was married to the Lady Blanche. At Reading Loch, we came up with a steam launch belonging to some friends of mine, and they towed us up to within a mile of Streatley. It's very delightful being towed up by a launch. I prefer it myself to rowing. The run would have been more delightful still if it hadn't been for a lot of wretched small boats that were continually getting in the way of our launch, and to avoid running down which we had to be continually easing and stopping. It is really most annoying the manner in which these rowing boats get in the way of one's launch up the river. Something ought to be done to stop it. And they are so confoundedly impertinent too over it. You can whistle till you nearly burst your boiler before they will trouble themselves to hurry. I would have one or two of them run down now and then, if I had my way, just to teach them all a lesson. The river becomes very lovely from a little above Reading. The railway rather spoils it near Tilehurst, but from Mapledurham up to Streatley it is glorious. A little above Mapledurham Loch you pass Hardwick House, where Charles I played bowls. The neighbourhood of Pangbourne, where the quaint little Swan Inn stands, must be as familiar to the habitués of the art exhibitions as it is to its own inhabitants. My friend's launch cast us loose just below the grotto, and then Harris wanted to make out that it was my turn to pull. This seemed to me most unreasonable. It had been arranged in the morning that I should bring the boat up to 3 miles above Reading. Well, here we were 10 miles above Reading. Surely it was now their turn again. I could not get either George or Harris to see the matter in its proper light, however, so to save argument I took the sculls. I had not been pulling for more than a minute or so when George noticed something black floating on the water, and we drew up to it. George leant over it as we neared it, laid hold of it, and then he drew back with a cry and a blanched face. It was the dead body of a woman. It lay very lightly on the water, and the face was sweet and calm. It was not a beautiful face. It was too prematurely aged-looking, too thin and drawn to be that. But it was a gentle, lovable face, in spite of its stamp of pinch and poverty, and upon it was that look of restful peace that comes to the faces of the sick sometimes, when at last the pain has left them. Fortunately for us, we having no desire to be kept hanging about coroners' courts, some men on the bank had seen the body too, and now took charge of it from us. We found out the woman's story afterwards. Of course, it was the old, vulgar tragedy. She had loved and been deceived, or had deceived herself. Anyhow, she had sinned, some of us do now and then, and her family and friends, naturally shocked and indignant, had closed their doors against her. Left to fight the world alone with the millstone of her shame around her neck, she had sunk ever lower and lower. For a while, she kept both herself and the child on the 12 shillings a week that 12 hours drudgery a day procured her, paying 6 shillings out of it for the child and keeping her own body and soul together on the remainder. 6 shillings a week does not keep body and soul together very unitedly. They want to get away from each other when there's only such a very slight bond as that between them, and one day, I suppose, the pain and the dull monotony of it all had stopped before her eyes plainer than usual, and the mocking spectre had frightened her. She had made one last appeal to friends, but against the chill wall of their respectability, the voice of the erring outcast fell unheeded. Then she had gone to see her child, had held it in her arms and kissed it in a weary, dull sort of way, and without betraying any particular emotion of any kind, had left it, after putting into its hand a penny box of chocolates she had bought it, and afterwards, with her last few shillings, had taken a ticket and come down to Goring. It seemed that the bitterest thoughts of her life must have centered about the wooded reaches and the bright green meadows around Goring, but women strangely hug the knife that stabs them, and perhaps amidst the gall there may have mingled also sunny memories of sweetest hours, spent upon those shadowed deeps over which the great trees bend their branches down so low. She had wandered about the woods by the river's brink all day, and then when evening fell and the grey twilight spread its dusky robe upon the waters, she stretched her arms out to the silent river that had known her sorrow and her joy. And the old river had taken her into its gentle arms, and had laid her weary head upon its bosom, and had hushed away the pain. Thus had she sinned in all things, sinned in living and in dying. God help her and all other sinners, if any more there be. Goring on the left bank and Streatley on the right are both, or either, charming places to stay at for a few days. The reaches down to Pangbourne woo one for a sunny sail or for a moonlight row, and the country round about is full of beauty. We had intended to push on to Wallingford that day, but the sweet smiling face of the river had lured us to linger for a while, and so we left our boat at the bridge and went up into Streatley and lunched at the Bull, much to Montmorency's satisfaction. They say that the hills on each side of the stream here once joined and formed a barrier across what is now the Thames, and that then the river ended there above Goring in one vast lake. I am not in a position either to contradict or affirm this statement. I simply offer it. It is an ancient place, Streatley, dating back, like most riverside towns and villages, to British and Saxon times. Goring is not nearly so pretty a little spot to stop at as Streatley, if you have your choice, but it is passing fair enough in its way, and is near the railway in case you want to slip off without paying your hotel bill. End of chapter. Chapter 17. We stayed 2 days at Streatley and got our clothes washed. We had tried washing them ourselves in the river under George's superintendence, and it had been a failure. Indeed, it had been more than a failure, because we were worse off after we had washed our clothes than we were before. Before we had washed them, they had been very, very dirty, it is true, but they were just wearable. After we had washed them, well, the river between Reading and Henley was much cleaner after we washed our clothes in it than it was before. All the dirt contained in the river between Reading and Henley we collected during that wash and worked it into our clothes. The washerwoman at Streatley said she felt she owed it to herself to charge us just 3 times the usual prices for that wash. She said it had not been like washing, it had been more in the nature of excavating. We paid the bill without a murmur. The neighborhood of Streatley and Goring is a great fishing centre. There is some excellent fishing to be had there. The river abounds in pike, roach, dace, gudgeon, and eels just here, and you can sit and fish for them all day. Some people do. Well, they never catch them. I never knew anybody catch anything up the Thames except minnows and dead cats, but it's nothing to do, of course, with fishing. The local fisherman's guide doesn't say a word about catching anything. All it says is the place is a good station for fishing. And from what I've seen of the district, I'm quite prepared to bear out this statement. There's no spot in the world where you can get more fishing or where you could fish for a longer period. Some fishermen come here and fish for the day, and others stop and fish for a month. You can hang on and fish for a year if you want to. It'll all be the same. The Angler's Guide to the Thames says that jack and perch are also to be had here, but there the Angler's Guide is wrong. Jack and perch may be about there. Indeed, I know for a fact that they are. You can see them there in shoals when you're out for a walk along the banks. They come and stand half out of the water with their mouths open for biscuits. And if you go for a bathe, they crowd around and get in your way and irritate you. But they are not to be had by a bit of worm on the end of a hook or anything like it. Oh, not they. I'm not a good fisherman myself. I devoted a considerable amount of attention to the subject at one time and was getting on, I thought, fairly well, but the old hands told me that I should never be really good at it and advised me to give up. They said that I was an extremely neat thrower and that I seemed to have plenty of gumption for the thing and quite enough constitutional laziness. But they were sure I should never make anything of a fisherman. I had not got sufficient imagination. They said that as a poet or a shilling shocker writer or a reporter or anything of that kind, I might be satisfactory, but to gain any position as a Thames angler would require more play of fancy, more power of invention than I appeared to possess. Some people are under the impression that all that is required to make a good fisherman is the ability to tell lies easily and without blushing, but this is a mistake. Mere bald fabrication is useless. The veriest tyro can manage that. It is in the circumstantial detail, the embellishing touches of probability, the general air of scrupulous, almost a pedantic veracity that this experienced angler is seen. Anybody can come in and say, "Oh, I caught 15 dozen perch yesterday evening," or "Last Monday I landed a gudgeon weighing 18 pounds and measuring 3 feet from the tip to the tail." There's no art, no skill required for that sort of thing. It shows pluck, but that's all. No, your accomplished angler would scorn to tell a lie that way. His method is a study in itself. He comes in quietly with his hat on, appropriates the most comfortable chair, lights his pipe, and commences to puff in silence. He lets the youngsters brag away for a while, and then, during a momentary lull, he removes his pipe from his mouth and remarks as he knocks the ashes out against the bars of the grate, "Well, I had a haul on Tuesday evening that's not much good my telling anybody about." "Oh, why's that?" they ask. "Well, because I don't expect anybody would believe me if I did," replies the old fellow calmly, and without even a tinge of bitterness in his tone as he refills his pipe, requests the landlord to bring him 3 of scotch, cold. There's a pause after this, nobody feeling sufficiently sure of himself to contradict the old gentleman. So he has to go on by himself without any encouragement. "No," he continues thoughtfully, "I shouldn't believe it myself if anybody told it to me, but it's a fact for all that. I had been sitting there all afternoon and caught literally nothing, well, except a few dozen dace and a score of jack, and I was just about giving it up as a bad job when I suddenly felt a rather smart pull on the line. I thought it was another little one, and I went to jerk it up. Well, hang me if I could move the rod. It took me half an hour, sir, to land that fish, and every moment I thought the line was going to snap. I reached him at last, and what do you think it was? A sturgeon, a 40-pound sturgeon, taken on a line, sir. Yes, you may well look surprised. I'll have another 3 of scotch, landlord, please." And then he goes on to tell of the astonishment of everybody who saw it, and what his wife said when she got home, and what Joe Buggles thought about it. I asked the landlord of an inn up the river once if it did not injure him sometimes listening to the tales that the fishermen about there told him, and he said, "Oh, no, not now, sir. It did used to knock me over a bit at first, but Lord love you. Me and the missus, we listens to them all day now. It's what you're used to, you know. It's what you're used to. I knew a young man once. He was a most conscientious fellow, and when he took to fly fishing, he determined never to exaggerate his hauls by more than 25%. When I've caught 40 fish, said he, then I will tell people that I have caught 50, and so on. But I will not lie any more than that, because it's sinful to lie. But the 25% plan did not work well at all. He was never able to use it. The greatest number of fish he ever caught in one day was 3, and you can't add 25% to 3, at least not in fish. So he increased his percentage to 33 1/3, but again, that was awkward when he'd only caught 1 or 2. So to simplify matters, he made up his mind just to double the quantity. He stuck to this arrangement for a couple of months, and then he grew dissatisfied with it. Nobody believed him when he told them that he only doubled, and he therefore gained no credit that way whatsoever, while his moderation put him at a disadvantage among the other anglers. When he had really caught 3 small fish and said he'd caught 6, it used to make him quite jealous to hear a man, who he knew for a fact that only caught 1, going about telling people he'd landed 2 dozen. So eventually he made one final arrangement with himself, which he has religiously held to ever since. That was to count each fish that he had caught as 10, and to assume 10 to begin with. For example, if he did not catch any fish at all, then he said he caught 10 fish. You could never catch less than 10 fish by his system. That was the foundation of it. Then if by any chance he really did catch 1 fish, he called it 20, while 2 fish would count 30, 3 was 40, and so on. It was a simple and easily worked plan, and there's been some talk lately about its being made use of by the angling fraternity in general. Indeed, the committee of the Thames Anglers Association did recommend its adoption about 2 years ago, but some of the older members opposed it. They said they would consider the idea if the number were doubled and each fish counted as 20. If you ever have an evening to spare up the river, I should advise you to drop into one of the little village inns and take a seat in the tap room. You will be nearly sure to meet 1 or 2 old rod men sipping their toddy there, and they'll tell you enough fishy stories in half an hour to give you indigestion for a month. George and I don't know what had become of Harris. He'd gone out and had a shave early in the afternoon, and then had come back and spent full 40 minutes in pipe cleaning his shoes, and we had not seen him since. George and I, therefore, and the dog, left to ourselves, went for a walk to Wallingford on the second evening, and coming home we called in at a little riverside inn for a rest. We went into the parlor and sat down. There was an old fellow there, smoking a long clay pipe, and we naturally began chatting. He told us that it had been a fine day today, and we told him that it had been a fine day yesterday, and that we all told each other that we thought it would be a fine day tomorrow, and George said the crops seemed to be coming up nicely. After that, it came out somehow or other that we were strangers in the neighborhood, and that we were going away the next morning. Then a pause ensued in the conversation, during which our eyes wandered about the room. They finally rested on a dusty old glass case, fixed very high up above the chimney piece and containing a trout. It rather fascinated me, that trout. It was such a monstrous fish. In fact, at first glance, I thought it was a cod. "Ah," said the old gentleman, following the direction of my gaze. "Fine fellow that, ain't he?" "Quite uncommon," I murmured, and George asked the old man how much he thought it weighed. 18 pounds, 6 ounces, said our friend, rising and taking down his coat. "Yes," he continued, "it were 16 years ago, come the 3rd of next month, that I landed him. I caught him just below the bridge with a minnow. They told me he were in the river, and I said I'd have him, and so I did. You don't see many fish that size about here now, I'm thinking. Good night, gentlemen, good night." And out he went and left us alone. We could not take our eyes off the fish after that. It was really a remarkably fine fish. We were still looking at it when the local carrier, who had just stopped at the inn, came to the door of the room with a pot of beer in his hand, and he also looked at the fish. "Good-sized trout, that," said George, turning round to him. "Ah, you may well say that, sir," replied the man, and after a pull at his beer, he added, "Maybe you wasn't here, sir, when that fish was caught?" No, we told him. We were strangers in the neighborhood. Ah, said the carrier. Then, of course, how should you? It was nearly 5 years ago that I caught that trout. Oh, was it you who caught it then? Said I. Yes, sir, replied the genial old fellow. I caught him just below the lock, leastways what was the lock then, one Friday afternoon, and the remarkable thing about it is that I caught him with a fly. I gone out pike fishing, bless you, never thinking of a trout, and when I saw that whopper on the end of my line, blessed if it didn't quite take me aback. Now, you see, he weighed 26 pounds. Good night, gentlemen, good night. 5 minutes afterwards, a third man came in and described how he had caught it early one morning with bleak, and then he left, and a stolid, solemn-looking, middle-aged individual came in and sat down over by the window. None of us spoke for a while, but at length George turned to the newcomer and said, I beg your pardon. I hope you will forgive the liberty that we, perfect strangers in the neighborhood, are taking, but my friend here and myself would be so obliged if you tell us how you caught that trout up there. Why, who told you I caught that trout? Was the surprised query. We said that nobody had told us so, but somehow or other we felt instinctively that it was he who'd done it. Well, it's a most remarkable thing, most remarkable, answered the stolid stranger, laughing. Because, as a matter of fact, you're quite right. I did catch it. But fancy your guessing it like that. Dear me, it's really a most remarkable thing. And then he went on and told us how it had taken him half an hour to land it and how it had broken his rod. He said he'd weighed it carefully when he reached home and had turned the scale at 34 pounds. He went in his turn, and when he was gone, the landlord came in to us. We told him the various histories we had heard about his trout, and he was immensely amused, and we all laughed very heartily. Fancy Jim Bates and Joe Muggles and Mr. Jones and old Billy Maunders all telling you they'd caught it. Well, that is good, said the honest old fellow, laughing heartily. Yes, they are the sort to give it me to put up in my parlor as if they'd caught it, they are. And then he told us the real history of the fish. It seemed that he had caught it himself years ago when he was quite a lad, not by any art or skill, but by that unaccountable luck that appears to always wait upon a boy when he plays the wag from school and goes out fishing on a sunny afternoon with a bit of string tied to the end of a branch. He said that bringing home that trout had saved him from a whacking, and that even his schoolmaster said it was worth the rule of 3 and practice put together. He was called out of the room at this point. George and I again turned our gaze upon the fish. It really was a most astonishing trout. The more we looked at it, the more we marveled at it. It excited George so much that he climbed up on the back of a chair to get a better view of it. And then the chair slipped, and George clutched wildly at the trout case to save himself, and down it came with a crash, and George in the chair on top of it. You haven't injured the fish, have you? I cried in alarm, rushing up. I hope not, said George, rising cautiously and looking about. But he had. That trout lay shattered into 1,000 fragments. I say 1,000, but there may have been only 900. I didn't count them. We thought it strange and uncountable that a stuffed trout should break up into little pieces like that. And so it would have been strange and unaccountable if it had been a stuffed trout, but it was not. That trout was plaster of Paris. End of chapter. It seems that even more fun than actual fishing is talking about the one that got away. In the next episode, our penultimate one, a photographer shows up. If you subscribe to my newsletter, you'll get notified of my updates as soon as they're ready. If you enjoyed this reading or have other classics you'd like to hear, leave me a comment. Check out my other posts on my Substack at ravensview.substack.com. And remember to share this with your friends. Ta-ta for now.